After my last video where I told you about 8 places you should not move to, many of you asked me, well, how do I move abroad ethically then? And is it possible? So today I'm sharing with you a framework with 6 rules on how you can move to places and into neighborhoods without negatively impacting locals. Hi, welcome back. I'm Lily. I'm a travel journalist. If you're new here, my channel is all about helping you move consciously around the world. Today, I'm going to share 6 steps that you should keep in mind every time you move abroad so that you can minimize your impact on places that you're moving into and the neighborhoods and the communities that you're worried about so that you can be a positive contributor, a not that expat no one wants. The number one housing rule is that you should rent like a local. In other words, as much as possible, stay away from gentrified areas. You can find this out by doing your research and make sure that you're renting a place for the long term and preferably away from tourist zones. You've got to pay local market rates. That's something that you're going to have to research as well on the ground, asking around what is the normal rent price for a 1 bedroom, for a 2 bedroom, and find out what that rate is and pay in the local currency. When a landlord offers you a much higher rent, knowing that you're an American, then you should step away. Now, there are a lot of people who are going to push back on this and say, look, I can afford it. I worked hard all my life and I should be able to afford things like higher rent on an apartment. Besides, that's still something I can afford compared to the United States. But the thing is, you're not in the United States. And the thing is that your decisions actually trickle down to impact other people who will eventually be displaced from their historic neighborhoods. If you're a conscious traveler, which I assume you are by watching this video, it means that you care. And so you got to do the best you can not to have that impact. And again, choose places where there are not too many expats that you see that are from North America. And that shouldn't be hard to do to find a long-term apartment that is at market rate, local prices, and that you can furnish yourself and stay in long-term. Now, most of us will move abroad from North America with either a pension or remote income that comes in, online because we have different businesses that are digital or we sell digital products, a whole bunch of options that locals in the places in the global south particularly might not have. Ideally, you would be making your money locally. You would have a local job and you would really integrate into the local economic market. But that's not the case for most digital nomads. That's not the case for most retirees or people who move abroad today from North America. That's just a reality. So what do? Well, you can still bank locally. So open a local bank account and keep your money, a certain amount of money in a local economy. Buy from local businesses always, hire local services and pay them fair wages. Don't exploit the currency difference between the dollar and wherever you're at in, say, South America, and make sure that you're paying workers a fair wage and fair benefits. You're hiring them on a long-term basis. There are laws, obviously, labor laws that you'll have to observe in the country itself. So you definitely also want to be aware of those and apply them to the letter. Number 3 is a big one. And I would say it's one of the reasons that a lot of folks overseas have come to resent expats. You've got to learn to just listen, participate, and respect. That's it. You're going to have to listen for at least several first years that you live somewhere to not give a clear opinion on what you think the culture is like or what you think the way they do things there, and it should be better and it should be like this and that. Refrain from doing that. Refrain from thinking that you come from a better set of rules or way of life than others. Achieve conversational fluency. You don't want to wait until you're there to start learning a language. You should really learn as much as possible some of the courtesy phrases, some of the things to ask, and have a basic level of fluency before you go to a country that operates in a different language than English. And by the way, that includes countries like Belize, where they do speak English and English is the national language, but they speak Creole. Most Belizeans speak Creole, and that's really the lingua franca. So you do want to learn a few phrases of Creole to really feel like you're integrating and to show respect to the locals. Learn local history and politics. You really want to learn as much as possible about your destination. The past informs the present. Participate in community events. Every time you see a community event that's advertised, that you feel like you could fit in there, just go meet people. Don't just stick with expat events. I think that's just way easy. And also just, that's not integration. You can mix both. You can go to expat events. I certainly have done both. Go to do some expat events, not a lot, and then also go to local events, local gallery exhibit events, openings, you name it. There are always things to do, and you should go for those first. And then, ask locals that you meet, how can I be a good resident? How can I be a good expat? I guarantee you that will give you so many answers, and they'll tell you so many stories about North Americans who've moved to their country and have done XYZ. I mean, you name it. Right. In fact, this is one of the complaints that I hear about the most on forums, and I still see it today about how North Americans are entitled. They come in with their attitudes and their expectations. And if you're not matching up, they think you're less than, so that all of that builds resentment. And unfortunately, there are many bad apples that have come before you, probably before you move. So you may be placed in that basket before you can distinguish yourself and show that you're not one of those, one of them, right? You're not that expat. Respect the customs, even if you think it's ridiculous, even if you think it doesn't match with your beliefs, that has nothing to do with you and you should stay out of it. I also want to say a word about people who move somewhere and then suddenly you're seeing them all over YouTube and they're talking about the place they live. And I think it's absolutely fine to share the experience that you're having of cultural immersion and moving into a new place. I do want to caution, however, to be very careful about how much you show, how much you say also. Remember that it's the internet and it's there forever. And so if you are a new immigrant or you are in the process of getting your residency, these are all things that they can look up about you. And you don't want to come off as being, arrogant or pompous or even judgmental about the culture or the place. I'm not saying you should paint everything rosy, but the time you move is not the time to start criticizing. Keep things to yourself, listen, and just learn. You're going to find that when you move to many countries around the world, the take is more than the give. And so you really want a balance where you're contributing in some form or fashion so that you're leaving the place better off than you found it, right? And this is not saviorism, by the way. You are not to go in there and say, this is how you should do things and we should do that. And here's some money and I'm going to save this place. That's not going to work. You're going to be so disappointed and it's going to sting. My advice is just, like I said, you start with the learning, the listening, the integrating. And then after that, you decide, okay, here's a place where I can contribute my skills, perhaps, Maybe they need some teacher skills. Maybe they need someone to help with the bake sale. Maybe there's a professional skill that you can pass on to some high school students. Who knows, right? Whatever it is, you're a positive contributor to the place. It could also be that you're helping use your social channels to promote entrepreneurs and you're inviting your friends abroad, back home to come every time you visit, go to this place to eat, go to that place to buy your stuff, souvenirs, things like that. You can always be a positive contributor and a supporter. And that is one way to give. Building community abroad is probably one of the toughest parts of moving abroad. And when I say community, I'm not talking about community with other expats because that's pretty easy. Really building bridges with locals in that country is something that will take time and trust, and that is earned. Trust is earned overseas. You also want to be careful about who you mingle with. Not everyone friendly is a friend, it's no different than back home. You've got to stay a minimum of, say, 2 to 3 years at least to start building community ties for people to start recognizing you and trusting you. And then you'll go with the flow and you'll make friends. Make sure these friends are not transactional relationships, right? Because that tends to happen a lot overseas because of the imbalance economically. You're coming in with more money, this person has perhaps less, or you're in an environment where folks' income is lower than the environment that you came from. And so you've got to keep that in mind and always remember that friendships are not transactional in nature. They are supposed to be natural flowing and money should not be involved. Part of building relationships too is that you have to recognize your privilege. You have to recognize the fact that you always have the ability to pick up your passport and leave. You always have the ability to just leave at a moment's notice. Whereas the folks in the countries that you move to, particularly in the global south, do not have that luxury. They've got to get a visa, which is pretty expensive, time consuming. And in fact, some people, as you know, apply 2, 3, 4 times. Some have never left their country. So imagine living in a place where you've never gone abroad, you've never met other people, other cultures directly. You've seen them, through tourism and through the flow of foreigners that come to your country, but that is not the same as you being abroad and opening up your mind to the world. So you have to remember that, and you have to remember that in all of your relationships as you move abroad. I've said this in my other videos, The humility rule is huge. You are a guest in that country. You've only just arrived there, perhaps. You've only been there 2 years, 3 years. That is not a lot of time. You've got to go through the stages of moving abroad, which starts with the honeymoon phase, right? The, okay, I think I'm okay here phase. And then the, oh my God, I'm starting to get annoyed with this place phase. And the, oh my gosh, I freaking hate it here phase. And then the reconciliation and like, I think I'm just going to stay here anyway, or I'm out of here, right? So you've got those options, and that's the difference. Except that you're never going to fully perhaps belong in a place that it makes you happy and it fits your lifestyle. That's great, but you don't fully yet belong because that takes time and that's earned. And perhaps you never will. I don't know. But either way, lower your expectations and understand that you came from the outside. Listen more than you talk when it comes to local issues. You can ask questions. I think I always tell people it's always better to ask questions and learn than it is to inject and opine when really you only know half of the story. And like I said, improving things is not your job. Do not come there with the Western mentality of wanting to fix things or thinking that things are better than. You've been welcomed, and that is something that you should show gratitude for at all times. You are not owed anything. For those of you who are worried about not being welcomed because now you feel like everyone's against Americans, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Most strangers are actually very kind and welcoming. If they are not, handle it gracefully and walk away. That's okay. Not everyone's going to like everybody. I think even somebody else said that in my comments. That's the way the world goes, right? I mean, here in America, we all know not everyone's welcome. So in July, Forbes came up with a list of the best places to retire abroad, and Belize was on that list. And I want to show you what some of the comments online were from Belizeans, not anonymous bots, Belizeans, on what they think about this and being included on a list that reaches so many people, including so many North Americans. By the way, these lists are kind of problematic because they also help push this whole wave of migration that goes to only certain specific spots as opposed to spreading it all out. So anyway, let me read you what some people were saying online. I'll be happy with them wanting to come and retire if they're open to adopting our culture instead of coming with that entitled mentality. Comment number 2, unfortunately, many who come and decide to stay bring all of their unfriendly ways of being. Greed and corruption follows as they use money to change the very things that made them want to retire to Belize. Now, if this isn't the very thing I talked to you about, the integration and the being humble and not allowing relationships to be transactional and not infusing your money as a way to influence change and save the destination. Another one said, yes, gentrification. This drives up the cost of living for locals, actually. We are done asked out of the housing market, and this is exactly why. But yes, welcome them. Celebrate selling out. Another woman said, I totally agree with you. I read it earlier and I was thinking, thanks for wanting to come, but no thanks. Life is already hard for us Belizeans without outsiders driving up the cost of living. So you see, it's already happening in Belize. That is something that you want to, keep in mind. You guys were asking me after the last video, how do I move without causing harm? How do I move, but ethically? Is it possible? Yes, it is. If you keep in mind everything I described in this video and ask people in the destination too, what they think about their specific neighborhood and their specific city. And of course, locals, remember, are not a monolith. So you'll have the elite locals, perhaps, who think everything's cool. Then you'll have the ones that are struggling with housing, the ones that don't have good employment or are not paid that well. I mean, it's like the gamut, right? Just like in the US. But at the same time, it's a smaller country. These are smaller countries compared to the United States. So you really do want to keep in mind your impact. And I want to thank all of those who asked about that, by the way. That's a pretty cool question to ask. Thank you. You guys gave me a good idea for this video. So I hope this was super helpful to you. If you didn't catch a previous video of 7 places you should not move abroad, it's right here somewhere. And thanks again for being here. I look forward to hearing what your thoughts are on this. What are your ways that you move ethically? What would you add? Leave me a comment. Thanks so much for being here. Subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.